I'm Jack Kennedy, and they hit a lot harder in my opinion too.
What is up, everybody? My name is Keelan McNamara, and everyone's got a plan until they get hit with my views.
I am Hunter Boss. He just wanted to go to the distance by the looks of it, but he couldn't even do that.
And this is the MMA Island Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Island Podcast. I am Jack Kennedy alongside Keelan McNamara and Hunter Boss. Wow, what a night of fights in Bellator. AJ McKee upset Pitbull and became the Bellator featherweight champion, won the tournament. UFC had a very eventful fight night as well. Despite all the card pullouts and everything, the main event was very fascinating. And we have a very interesting topic, saving for last. Should MMA be in the Olympics? And I cannot wait for that discussion. Let's go ahead and get into it. AJ McKee, what a performance, what a Bellator card. Won the belt by a first round submission over Pitbull, standing guillotine. Hunter, how would he do compared to the best UFC fighters, the best featherweights in the world?
I got to give it hats off to AJ. He did a fantastic job on Saturday night. It was amazing to watch, and he's one of the greatest finishers in Bellator right now. I think it's anywhere he fights, he can finish, which is a good thing. And when it comes to the UFC, it's also a bad thing because when you're a great finisher, that leaves you susceptible to getting finished here. And when it comes to the top featherweights here, we got some monsters when it comes to it. We got Brian Ortega, we have Korean Zombie, we have Calvin Kattar, we have Max Holloway, we have the champ Alexander Volkanovski. When it comes to the top five, I think AJ can beat two of them. I think he can beat Korean Zombie, and I think on a good day, he can beat Calvin Kattar. But on a regular day, I don't think he can beat Calvin Kattar. And when it comes down to it, I don't think he can beat Holloway, Volk, or even when it comes to Brian Ortega. I think Brian Ortega is a better submission artist than AJ McKee, in my opinion. And he has more power in his hands when it comes to fighting in the stand-up. I think Volkanovski is just a better MMA fighter in general. I think he can mix it up super good with the wrestling and with just regular stand-up striking. And then Max Holloway, I just don't think there's anyone better than Max Holloway right now. So it's just hard to say for that. I think he's better in both divisions. I don't think he can get taken down, and I think he can just pepper him up when he's up in the striking. So when it comes down to it, I think AJ McKee's fantastic. And if he were to join the UFC, that would be beautiful and it would be amazing. And we can really have the question proven. But when it comes to it right now, hypothetically, I think the top three UFC featherweights can beat AJ, but when it comes to everyone else, AJ's got it.
Yeah, man. First of all, a huge congratulations to AJ McKee. What an unbelievable night for him, and what an unbelievable night for Bellator. Insane win, amazing win over a tough guy like Patricio Pitbull. Killer head kick and a nasty standing guillotine as well. That was vicious to end the fight the way he did. This is a really interesting question, and I'm kind of glad that it's AJ that brought it up. The problem for AJ McKee is that there's so many different dimensions to this question. And if we consider the top five at featherweight, which is what Hunter's just outlined, the Korean Zombie, Calvin Kattar, and then Volkanovski, Ortega, and Holloway, I agree with Hunter on this one. I think there's two that AJ McKee could beat, and then I think there's three that are just a bit too, not too good for him, but at the moment they're just a little bit too advanced. I give him a good chance against Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar gets hit a lot. His wrestling is very good, but his striking defense, I think, is pretty porous. And I think AJ McKee, especially with that lethal southpaw head kick, is open to knocking Kattar out if he can hit him hard enough, because Kattar is just an absolute monster. The Korean Zombie is a very, very difficult prospect because he's just tough all around. He never gets knocked out, and he's a very, very advanced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, so it's extremely hard to even advance guard on him, let alone tap him out. I think AJ McKee could win a decision over the Korean Zombie. I don't think he'd finish him, but on his best day, I think he'd be able to land just enough to get a decision over the Korean Zombie. And then we're talking about the top three at featherweight, which is Brian Ortega, Alexander Volkanovski, and Max Holloway. And I very much agree with Hunter's assessment on this. It's very hard not to, if we're being honest, because it is so spot on. Brian Ortega is one of the best pure Brazilian Jiu Jitsu practitioners in the UFC, bar none. He trains under the Gracies in California. He can literally pull guard from anywhere, and he is comfortable anywhere on the ground or in the clinch. And I could see him catching AJ with a standing or with a pulling guard in midair guillotine, taking it to the ground, maybe even transitioning to a heel hook and catching him out of the transition. So I think AJ would find it tough in that regard. Volkanovski gets nowhere near enough respect for how good of a fighter he is. The second Holloway fight, which, all right, I think everybody will agree, Max had 3-2. I think that tarnished how we see Volkanovski and how little respect people generally give him. But Volkanovski's an amazing fighter. His wrestling's world class, and his hands are nothing to sleep on either. So I could see Volkanovski getting a decision win over AJ McKee if he was in the featherweight division. And then Max Holloway is just the best 145 fighter there's probably ever been. And I think the close second there is probably Jose Aldo. At the moment, Holloway is just on it. He's in a different level of existence. He's in a different galaxy to every other featherweight in the planet. He looks unbeatable. He feels unbeatable. And Max is still very young as well. We forget he's only like 31 or 32, I think. So he hasn't even really reached his peak yet in terms of his age, which is a terrifying thought if you're a 145. So if AJ McKee were ever to join, it would be amazing. I'm fully with you guys on that. I don't think anybody would argue otherwise. And he would definitely make waves, and he would definitely be a top 5 featherweight. But I don't think he would have quite enough to crack the very upper echelons of the division.
Yeah, that's almost a perfect breakdown. I agree with both of what you guys said. Hunter, you kicked it off perfectly, and Keelan, you carried it on beautifully as well. Now, I will say this: the argument is very interesting, and let me start by, again, I have to do it as well. But, also as covering the event, watching it live, it was a different feeling that Bellator night. That did not feel like a normal Bellator card. That felt like something elevated. And AJ McKee has that star power and has that excitement and fighting in front of the home fans. It was really an amazing event to see, and credit to him. Beautiful performance. And he's the champ. When you're talking about Bellator to UFC caliber, though, there is a difference, and not necessarily in the fighter themselves, but there's a big difference in the competition that a fighter like AJ McKee will be fighting over in Bellator to compare to fighters that might not be as good as AJ McKee, but I think would beat him just because of the pure experience they have in the UFC, facing the best of the best of the best every other fight. I think in the top 5, I actually disagree with you guys on one part here. I think the Korean Zombie would beat him 10 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10. I won't say 10. 9 times out of 10, I think the Korean Zombie wins. First off, striking wise, the Korean Zombie is one of the best strikers in the featherweight division still. He's overlooked because he's off of a couple losses, but he is a phenomenal fighter and has amazing stand up. You don't want to go to the ground with him because he will submit you. Actually, didn't he win his last fight? Who did he fight last?
He just fought Dan Ige, and
Yeah, and didn't he win that? Yeah, he won that
unanimous
Yeah, you're
decision.
right.
fairly easily. Yeah, he won that like easily. So that proves my point even further. He is a phenomenal striker, and Dan Ige's best shot was striking, and Korean Zombie outstruck him and outgrappled him in that fight. It was just a dominant performance. So I think just complete fire wise and the experience, I think Korean Zombie is one of the toughest fighters in the world, and I just think that would be such a terrible matchup for AJ McKee. Now Calvin Kattar is a different conversation. I definitely would make a better case for Calvin Kattar losing to AJ McKee just because of the explosiveness of AJ McKee. But then again, this is where the experience thing comes in. AJ McKee hasn't faced a guy with the volume and the power and just the pure boxing skills. Yeah, he got outclassed by Max Holloway, but Max Holloway's an anomaly. You talk about these anomaly fighters like Khabib, Max Holloway, Daniel Cormier at the top of his prime and everything. Like, you're not going to be able to beat them no matter who you are. Calvin Kattar is that, and I think that'll be a difficult matchup for AJ McKee as well. And another reason I think that is because just look at the first 2 minutes of the fight between AJ McKee and Pitbull, and the respect they had for each other. They really weren't engaging at all, and they were kind of feeling out each other and stuff. In the UFC, in the top 5 of featherweight, that 2 minutes will not happen with these top level guys because they will close you down and start to implement their games from the get go at the beginning of the bell. Now, maybe that benefits AJ McKee, but I don't think it does. I think AJ McKee is better whenever he operates from his own pace, like he did against Pitbull. He was able to set up and land that kick, which was basically the first shot of the fight, and drop him. And then he really could have finished him from there, but he celebrated and then got the choke in. I don't think he gets that opportunity with a guy like Calvin Kattar, with the Korean Zombie. Now, one fight that I think would be fascinating to see, and weirdly, I would give AJ McKee the advantage in, would be Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yair Rodriguez has great kicks and stuff, but he gasses out very quickly. And if he's not able to finish that opponent, AJ McKee's a really big featherweight, like a really big featherweight. So Yair Rodriguez wouldn't even have that reach advantage over him to land those kicks, to land those power kicks. And if Yair Rodriguez isn't fighting the way he likes to be fighting, which is why I think that Max Holloway matchup would have just been one of the worst fights for Yair Rodriguez he could have taken. I think AJ McKee could be similar. And then also if it goes to the ground, which it very well could in that fight, I would favor AJ McKee over Yair Rodriguez if it went to that point in the fight. But besides that, I don't see him being Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega, the new Brian Ortega we've seen, is just so well rounded. I think he's going to be the champ pretty soon. Volkanovski, again, it's a recency thing because of him losing or beating Max Holloway, but we thought he lost. But Volkanovski, there's a reason he's the champ right now. He keeps it close. He keeps it close enough to where the judges might give it to another thing. And he's also a very, very dominant champion. He's very good. That wrestling is just going to be another factor in there. And he can gas out anybody unless your name is Max Holloway. And he would do that against AJ McKee. Max Holloway, you guys already talked about it. That's another conversation. I mean, I don't favor anybody against Max Holloway. I think very few people do, just because he's that good. So I would love to. Obviously, I would love to see AJ McKee in the UFC. I think fights like him versus Arnold Allen would be fascinating. Him versus Dan Ige would be fascinating. A bad matchup for him, but one I would love to see, I think, would be Edson Barbosa and Giga Chikadze. But those fights would be fireworks. And if he's able to survive the early onslaught from a guy like Edson Barbosa, we don't really know about Giga Chikadze yet. That guy's terrifying because we don't know what his potential is. But as far as Edson Barbosa, if he can gas out Edson Barbosa early, then he can implement his game and start to work. That could be a fascinating fight. I think it's critical for a guy like that, if he was to come over to the UFC, to not immediately go for the Max Holloways, for the Brian Ortegas, for the Chance Youngs. I think the best bet for him would be to start at the 9, 8, 7 range, 6 even against Arnold Allen. And those are all ridiculously difficult fights. By the way, how stacked is featherweight? We talk about this all the time, but how stacked is this weight class? It's not an easy one to come into. Start around the middle of the pack range, get a couple fights in, and then work your way up from there, because then you can adjust to the skill level change and the pace of the fight, because it's a lot different than Bellator. It's weird watching the fight comparison between UFC and Bellator, because even though there's some phenomenal fighters in Bellator, just the pace and the skill level, just because of experience wise, the difference is crazy. So get a couple fights in the middle there, but hey, if just the question of what we'd like to see him in the UFC, the answer is absolutely yes. We would all love to see AJ McKee in the UFC, and just look at all these amazing matchups we could make with him in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think AJ McGee is a bad matchup for a lot of people in just combat sports in general. When I take a look at AJ McGee, I see like a little bit of like prime Aljamain Sterling, and I see a little bit of prime Tony Ferguson in a way, just because of the Brazilian jiu-jitsu that he offers against his opponents. When he's on the ground, he's crafty. And that's why I'd give AJ McGee a lot of wins against a lot of UFC fighters right now. The reason I wouldn't give it against the Korean Zombie personally, I just think that southpaw kick is just too deadly, and I think that would catch the Zombie. And the Zombie's been susceptible to knockouts lately. His chin is a little bit weak still. He was hurt against Ortega 2 or 3 times. He got knocked out cold against Yair. I think AJ can expose that weakness even further, and he can use that to his advantage. Don't get me wrong. I think if that doesn't happen, then the Zombie has the fight no matter what. I think if AJ can't land that head kick, then the Zombie has him everywhere else in the fight. But I think if AJ can, then I think he's got the fight. But that's a lot of what ifs and a lot of if this happens and if this happens. So when it comes down to it, I think AJ McGee's a fantastic fighter, and he's still young. So I would love to see what he can do further on, and then maybe a year or two down the line, the the answers might be different for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great analysis. I think Jack, especially as well as you, man, you made some amazing, amazing points there. One fight that I would actually give AJ McKee for coming into the featherweight division is Shane Burgos.
Oh, I
I
love
think,
that.
I
Yeah.
think that would be a really good litmus test of AJ McKee and seeing how he adapts to the pace of the UFC. Because you make a really good point, and it's really not a point enough people talk about. There's something of a different energy or pace to the UFC. It's kind of weird to explain, but it does make you fight differently when you're in there and when you're under the lights of the UFC. There is definitely something to it. So I actually think the move will happen at some point in the future. And as long as it stays the way it is, I would give it to Burgos. I think that's a rock solid choice, and I think it would be fireworks. Um, I just kind of want to touch on the Korean zombie point for a little bit just before we move on, because I think Hunter made some really good points there. My favoring of AJ McKee over the Korean zombie is in no way any disrespect to the Korean zombie, because he is a legend in his own right, and he is still as good as he has ever been. The problem with the Korean zombie, especially in his last couple of fights, especially what I noticed in the Ortega fight, is that his boxing defense has started to slacken a little bit. You know, he's always been a volume puncher and he's always been able to take a punch. No one's ever debated that. But he started to take more punches now, and he started to almost check leg kicks a bit less at the expense of charging in and getting in his opponent's face. And AJ McKee is an excellent counter puncher, and he's a really good counter kickboxer too. You know, we didn't see it in the Pitbull fight, obviously, because like you said, Jack, and you're absolutely right, mate. The first shot that he really threw was that southpaw head kick. But the Korean Zombie has shown in his last few fights that in an attempt to engage in a clinch type fight against his opponent, he's almost willing to let down all his defense just to get to that position. And AJ has some nasty elbows and he has some nasty leg kicks too. And the Korean Zombie is like the South Korean Terminator, but he will eventually start to get punished, and he will start to bleed heavily if someone like AJ McKee is allowed to impose their rhythm on him and he's allowed to do his work against him. So I think AJ McKee would be an amazing, amazing addition. And there's also one other reason that I'd like to see AJ McKee in there, not only because of his incredible talent, which we all know he has. I think Saturday night was so much more important for AJ McKee and Bellator, more than just beating Pitbull. I think in AJ McKee, we can truthfully say that we have seen the first ever homegrown Bellator superstar
Yeah.
in AJ McKee. You know, guys like Michael Chandler who've come over to the UFC from Bellator, amazing fighters, but they've never really been homegrown in Bellator. They've never been developed there. They never really developed their craft there. They've always been great in other organizations. AJ McKee has come up through the ranks and plied his craft in Bellator, and now he is the champion of Bellator. So if you bring him into the UFC, you really have a standard there to measure against the other fighters in your division. And it's not just based on ability alone, it's based on organization versus organization. In AJ McKee, you really do now have a standard bearer of Bellator that you could measure against the UFC's division. So if you bring in AJ McKee from Bellator, you get so many more advantages, almost more than fireworks fights, which of course in themselves are the ultimate advantage. Bringing in AJ McKee gives you that unspoken comparison with every single fight.
Yeah. Hey, those are really good points. I mean, AJ McKee is also only 26, which is so exciting because he's just getting started. I see. I don't see it. I mean, the Korean Zombie, the last time he's been knocked out was that miracle elbow by Yair Rodriguez way back in 2018. Before that, he lost to Jose Aldo in 2014, which that Jose Aldo was another level. I mean, we've been seeing hype up stuff for Jose Aldo fighting Pedro Munoz, which by the way, what a fight. I cannot wait for that. But I mean, that was another level of Jose Aldo. He only loses either by a miracle elbow that just catches, like he's not even looking. The reason it knocked him out is because how does that even happen?
Shut his brain off.
Exactly. And Jose Aldo at that time also, there was an injury in that fight, and Jose Aldo was just another level. And that wasn't the prime Korean Zombie either. He doesn't get finished that often. He ate Brian Ortega's best shots, literally like spinning elbows, everything he had to offer at him. And yeah, he got dropped. Yeah, he was rocked, but he never at any point in the fight looked out of it. Like he was getting outclassed, but he didn't look like he was about to get just stumbling and knocked out. Um, the thing is also whenever he fought Dan Ige, if you were telling me after the Brian Ortega, if we are making this argument after the Brian Ortega fight, then I agree with you guys 100%. But the way he looked versus Dan Ige was so tactical. And Keelan, I agree with your point about the defense. I think that's a lot with age as well. But what he's been able to do is, especially in that Dan Ige fight, was adapt that new, the speed that he once had, he doesn't have as much anymore, into a different type of defense. I don't think he's ever there just sitting there like Pitbull was and that head kick lands. I don't think that ever happens in a million years with the Korean Zombie. I think he's out of there, and yeah, he's clinching AJ McKee. AJ McKee's also a taller, longer fighter than the Korean Zombie, but the Korean Zombie, I would make the argument, has more power and is just a physically bigger guy. So in those clinch transitions, I think the Korean Zombie would dominate those positions and get them to the ground. And once the Korean Zombie has you to the ground, that's just another conversation because he's just so good and so weird on the ground that very few, whenever he decides to go there, which he doesn't decide to go there all the time, it's just such a dominant thing for him there. So that's why I just think he's a bad matchup. But hey, I mean, let's see it, right? Let's make it happen. That's the fight. AJ McKee though, massive congratulations. So great to watch that Bellator card was seriously amazing. Now let's move on to the other noteworthy card this Saturday, which was Sean Strickland versus Uriah Hall. Hunter, what'd you make of this main event?
Honestly, if we're being completely honest, it was a little lackluster in my opinion. I think it could have been more explosive. It had a lot more hype leading up to it, and it didn't live up to the hype in my opinion. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a good fight in general. I think Sean Strickland made sure to make it look like a one-sided fight, and he did that emphatically. That jab he had was absolutely precise beyond belief. I mean, it was on par with Rob Font's jab against Cody Garbrandt. Like, it was making Uriah Hall rethink why he was stepping in the octagon that night. I think it really frustrated Uriah Hall. It got him out of his mood, and it really made him just stumble when he should have been throwing precision strikes. He should have been throwing more kicks. He should have done a lot more things in that fight that he didn't do. So when it came down to it, Sean Strickland was just the better fighter that night. I think his stand-up and his jab and his cross and then jab cross, step back cross. I think those were all amazing combos that Sean Strickland threw. And I think 9 out of 10, even 10 out of 10 times, if they were to fight again, Sean Strickland would win almost every single one of them. And I remember saying on the podcast not too long ago that I thought Uriah Hall was going to win. But now looking back on the fight, I'm like, there's no way he would have won any time. I mean, Sean Strickland was just absolutely dominating that night. So I think Sean Strickland is going to be a problem in his weight division, and I think it's going to be a fantastic career, and it's going to keep going up and up and up. So I wish only the best for Sean Strickland, and I hope Uriah Hall comes back with the fury.
Yeah, this fight actually gave me very, very real Colby Covington, Robbie Lawler vibes.
Yeah.
And that, there was the volume punching, there was the wrestling. It was really a running over of Uriah Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Strickland was like a Mack truck, and he just ran him over all over the octagon. And it got to the point where I was watching this fight at the end of the first round, and I thought, okay, Sean's dominated the first round, come out and land something. Second round goes by, all right, come out and land something. You can see where I'm going with this already. It got to the fourth or the fifth round, and I was thinking, all right, Uriah, come on, let's land something big, get Sean's respect, get yourself back in the fight. And it just never looked like it was going to happen. Like Hunter said, and again, this is one occasion, Hunter, no disrespect at all. I wish I didn't have to agree with you, but I do. I can only agree with what's in front of me. There was never a second that Uriah Hall looked like he was getting back into this fight. His confidence looked totally gone after the first round. It really did. I kept hoping to myself, all right, let's land a big knee in the clinch. Let's land even a decent leg kick to slow up Strickland coming forward. Let's get something just to try and make the fight more even. but it just never looked like it. He just got beat from pillar to post for 25 minutes. There's not much. I can't give a very eloquent analysis of this fight because it was that one-sided. Sean Strickland came out, said he wanted to make a statement, and make a statement he did. I have to give him a hell of a lot of credit because he looked amazing, pushed the pace from the beginning and never let up. And like Hunter said, he took the words right out of my mouth. Sean Strickland is going to be a problem for everybody at 185 because I don't think there's a fighter at 185 that pushes the pace the way Sean Strickland does. Strickland is a legitimized maniac in that he does not care about getting hit. He doesn't care about getting punched. He doesn't care about getting taken down. All he wants to do is press you forward, break your gas tank, and break your spirit. And that's what he did to Uriah Hall. And if he can do that to someone as gifted and talented as Uriah Hall, then there's a hell of a lot of 185 that he can do that to as well. Massive congratulations to Sean Strickland. Very impressive performance. As for Uriah, I said on the podcast last week that because he was finally coming in with good energy and a win streak and some positivity, that he could convert that into facing genuine adversity and he would channel it and tap into his true form. And I have to admit, I'm really disappointed that he didn't. I thought this was the fight where everything turns around. He's a solidified top 10. He starts to make a charge in the top 5. I really hope Uriah Hall's back in his next fight, but he has to learn to unleash himself. Now, admittedly, he suffered some awful misfortune in his last couple of fights. He had to beat down his idol, Anderson Silva. Admittedly, it's the fight game, but we're all human beings here at the end of the day. And then Chris Weidman, that would shake anybody. I'm not mad at that. But he's got to come out in his next fight and he's got to start knocking people out violently because he's got to tap into prime time now. This isn't the time for Uriah Hall. We need prime time and we need it now, or he's just going to be stuck in this cycle forever.
Yeah, hey guys, great breakdown. But I gotta say, 1-2 on the last podcast. Sean Strickland all the way. Let's go. But yeah,
Good job. You did it.
I had to say it. No,
that was good.
It
Lap it up,
was.
Jack. Lap it up.
It was, I think, one word to describe that fight for me would be frustrating because Uriah Hall, of anyone at middleweight, has the most potential, has all the skills, I think, to legitimately, if not become champion, be one of the top 3 contenders in middleweight. I think right now he has the potential to do it. And throughout his career, he's had the potential too. I mean, he's had one of his biggest wins, and I'd say arguably his biggest win, was against Gegard Mousasi whenever he landed that spinning side kick to the head and everything. And from that point, I thought he was going to skyrocket. But the problem is, for some reason, it's just every time he gets a major win like that, it never really works out for Uriah Hall in the way that he would like it to, or we would like it to. And knowing his personality and the person that he is, he's a very caring person. He's a very good person. The Chris Weidman leg break thing, I did figure that was going to shake him up. And that's kind of what happened. It was just Uriah Hall never really looked in it. He was always catching up from the very beginning. If Sean Strickland landed one punch, Uriah Hall would then throw one punch. Maybe it wouldn't even land, but then he would attempt one. It was always 2 for 1 attempt. And it just felt like that for the entire fight. Sean Strickland, credit to him, he was doing his thing. He was just in there. He was having fun. I mean, that's the new Sean Strickland. You got to love him. He's a personality in there. And that's the way he fights too, and it's effective. But if Uriah Hall was, I think, mentally in it 100%, I think he gets past Sean Strickland fairly easily. I think he gets past most guys in middleweight fairly easily. But I just don't know. If he'll ever be at that point, at that peak game for a continued amount of time. We've seen him at that peak moment for individual fights, and it's greatness what you see with Uriah Hall. And then everybody's like, "Oh, Uriah Hall, look at what he's doing." But then it's the follow-up fight, and then it's just like, again, here we are. Look, it's not over for Uriah Hall. There's still definitely time for him to come up. But like Keelan said, this next fight, whoever is against, you need to come out there with absolute fury and go for that finish because the way it's looking right now, it's not looking great. Hey, credit to Sean Strickland. Great game plan. He really just picked him apart for 5 rounds. One judge gave 1 round to Uriah Hall. There's always going to be that in the UFC. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's disappointing because we all love Uriah Hall. Most people who watch the UFC love Uriah Hall and his story from The Ultimate Fighter. But I really hope, and hey, it's not over. I really hope he can start working at that. And if we get that peak Uriah Hall, I will stick to this, even if he doesn't do anything. If he loses the rest of his fights, if we had a prime time Uriah Hall for 5 fights in a row, he could legitimately challenge for the title, if not win the title. With the power that he has, the speed that he didn't really gas out in that fight. He has great cardio. It's just a matter of throwing it and not hesitating. And if his opponent gets off to a good start, how do you come back from that? And that's the biggest thing for me for Uriah Hall. It's more of a mental thing than the physical thing. And if he's able to do that, then the sky's the limit. But once again, great, all credit to Sean Strickland. Great performance. He did what he had to do. And I agree with what you guys said too. Sean Strickland looks like a very interesting threat at middleweight. Every fight, he just keeps improving. His first fight night main event, that's a really big deal, especially for a guy like Sean Strickland. Where did Sean Strickland come from? This COVID lockdown, he's been fighting, he's been active, he's got his name out there, and now he's going to be fighting in the top 10 at middleweight. So credit to Sean Strickland. Great performance from him.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's something that we haven't even talked about for you yet. Sean Strickland's cardio in that match was unfreaking believable.
Yeah.
Come 5th round, he was looking like Israel Adesanya against Marvin Vettori. He wasn't even breathing that hard. He wasn't even breathing through his mouth yet. Like, he was going absolutely insane. Like, I think that this is prime Sean Strickland we're talking about. We're talking about, I can't wait to see prime Uriah Hall. We're looking at a prime fighter right now in the UFC, and the way he fights, it shouldn't work. He's not moving his head. He's walking forward. He has his hands up. Yes, he does have his hands up, but he just won't stop throwing, so it leaves him susceptible to a knockout. Yet no one can capitalize on it because of the simple volume that he throws and the jab that frustrates his opponents. I'm loving Sean Strickland right now. Uriah Hall, on the other hand, yes, we can blame it on some mental, like maybe he wasn't there all mentally and whatnot, but he had every chance he could get in that fight to knock out Sean Strickland, and he could not. And I don't think that's just because of mental here. I think because Sean Strickland's ability to adapt in a fight and really just ensue his pressure and his game plan is absolutely unparalleled to any other fighter right now in that division, other than maybe the champ and maybe the number 1 or number 2 contender. I think Sean Strickland's he does a great job of just completing his game plan, going out there and just doing whatever he wants in there. He's looking dominant in all these fights he's been having, and I can't wait to see him next. Uriah Hall, on the other hand, I think a good comeback fight could be maybe Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland versus Uriah Hall could be a really fun striking exhibition.
That would be good.
They're both big fighters in that weight division. Kevin Holland probably has a bit more of a reach advantage towards that, but that never really stopped Uriah Hall when it came to that. So if Uriah Hall wants a good comeback fight and Kevin Holland also needs a good comeback fight, boom, these are 2 fighters who are on loss streaks right now. Sure, they're on loss or not. I mean, not streaks, but Kevin Holland's on a loss streak. Uriah Hall, that last performance, you could say he was on a loss streak just because of the 5 rounds that he lost back to back to back to back. It was depressing to see. So a fight against these 2 fighters could be a lot of fun. I don't know who would win it right now, but Dana, if you're listening, book it.
Book it, yeah. Listen to Hunter, yeah.
Guys, Dana's listening. He's going to make this.
We're
not going to get any credit for it, especially Hunter, because that's an amazing shout. I love
it. It is, yeah. I love it.
I have to admit, whenever I watch Sean Strickland, he reminds me of one fighter much clearly above everybody else. Admittedly, I'm not saying he has his wrestling ability because I don't know if he does, but he whenever I look at Sean Strickland, I really see a middleweight Colby Covington.
Yeah.
Because I see that gas tank and I see the pressure and I see a fighter who goes out and what he does is he just smothers and he carpet bombs his opponents because they never get a chance to come out and they never get a chance to breathe. And people think it's a very basic tactic, but by God, is it effective? And Sean Strickland is so good at doing it. And it's really going to lead to a lot of success for him. Because at middleweight, you have a lot of strikers in this division, a lot of elite strikers. But there's strikers who need space and time and distance to carry out their game plan. And Sean Strickland's not going to let them execute that, and he has no fear of walking into the fire to stop it. And that's a really dangerous thing when you're facing an opponent who has no fear. And we could say for sure that Sean Strickland has got none of that. As for Uriah Hall, sort of to end off my segment in this, we are all fans of Uriah Hall, as Jack said perfectly, and you guys know I'm a big Uriah Hall guy. But I think I slightly disagree with what Hunter said on this point. I think it is psychological. The physical side, I have no concerns with Uriah because he did get smothered, yes, but he had the space and the openings to pull the trigger. He just couldn't. Now, whenever you have the physical ability of Uriah Hall, but you don't have the timing or the willingness to pull the trigger, that's an issue upstairs, not downstairs. He's got all the tools in his arsenal. In fact, he is one of the most advanced striking arsenals of any middleweight there is. I think, and again, I don't know what his psychology is, I don't know what his mindset is, but if he can speak to somebody who could unlock the potential, and I'll say timestamp it 3rd of August 2021, right here, right now. If we could see Uriah Hall with that mental burden unlocked and someone who unlocks that potential, we're looking at a top 5 middleweight, and we're looking at a guy challenging for the crown. I don't care if you laugh at me, come at me. I don't care. I honestly don't, because I have seen very few fighters with as much raw, gifted talent as Uriah Hall, and it's extremely disappointing that he loses the fight in this way. But as long as he gets his chin up, he comes back and he wins again. And as long as he can pull the trigger, then I will have belief in Uriah Hall until the day he retires, because we've never seen him fully in his own potential. The flashes we've seen have been highlight reels for a decade. How good do you think he's going to be if he can get into the full stream of his own potential? So massive congratulations to Sean Strickland. I don't want that to get in the way of what I'm saying, because he fully deserves his own credit and he's going to be a huge problem. But this is nowhere near the end for Uriah Hall. He will be back, and if he can pull the trigger, then trust me, you're looking at a big problem.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, look at Uriah Hall's physique alone. I mean, he's just always ripped going into every single fight. I mean, he's just like he's a monster.
It's like Melvin Manhoff.
I mean, for real, honestly, he's huge. The Sean Strickland thing, I actually think it might be a bit of both. I think, obviously that was my original point, but I think what kind of caused the mental thing was the adversity that was brought about by Sean Strickland. And I think that's what happened. I think, Keelan, you're spot on, and I completely agree with what you said. I just think, if he's fighting someone, maybe like whenever he fought Anderson Silva, if he's fighting Anderson Silva again, I think he still wins that, even if he had the mindset going into this fight that he did, because Anderson Silva doesn't offer what Sean Strickland did, because Sean Strickland came out there and won the first round. Then I think the mental thing kicked in. And then Keelan, from that point, I agree with you. I think he did have every opportunity to unload and didn't do it. But I think just everything that happened, just that little bit of hesitation, and then Sean Strickland being who Sean Strickland is, that prime Sean Strickland, like Hunter said, I think it's just it's a different fight. But yeah, I love the Colby Covington comparison. Another one I want to throw out there is he's kind of, for me, like a middleweight Stipe, and the fact that he's very scrappy. It is more volume over power. And again, we don't know his wrestling, which is going to be fascinating whenever he does face a decent wrestler. But just based off of what I've seen in training and stuff, it seems that he would have decent wrestling. He seems to be a well-rounded fighter. Usually guys with volume are well-rounded like that. And again, like both you guys said, that's such an interesting matchup for anybody in that middleweight division. Just the volume over the power and the nonstop pressure, and the guy's not going to get tired. That's a dangerous matchup for maybe a guy like Darren Till if they were ever to fight, because if Darren Till isn't able to put Sean Strickland away, which no one's been able to put him away or really rock him since he's been back, then the pressure and the cardio of Sean Strickland could really wear on Darren Till in the later rounds, and that could be fascinating how he handles that. So yeah, lots of matchups to make. Congratulations to Sean Strickland, of course. Now, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the topic that we came up with this at the end of the last podcast, and we already started having a conversation. We had to cut ourselves off because we wanted to save it for this one. Habib brought up an interesting thing about MMA potentially being in the Olympics. So let's just start a discussion about that. What do we think about potentially MMA being an Olympic sport? How do we think that would impact the sport of MMA, the Olympics? Hunter, what are you thinking?
It would skyrocket the sport no matter what. I mean, like, this is on a global scale. Every single country will be watching the Olympics. And if you can get some viewers on it from just everywhere, then there's no potential to how high the UFC could rise for this. And I mean, there's many arguments against why MMA should not be in the Olympics as it is. A lot of people think it's too violent and it's too bloody. But when you come down to it, boxing's in the Olympics. I mean, judo's in the Olympics. I mean, people bleed all the time in just judo alone. But when it comes to boxing, that is one of the bloodiest sports there is. And when it comes to long term violence and like long term hurtness of a fighter, physical damage when it comes to down to it, boxing has worse long term effects than MMA because I mean you mix it up. You don't just get hit in the head the entire time or just the body. There's wrestling that comes into it. There's judo. There's taekwondo. There's everything in MMA. So I think when it comes down to violence, violence is not necessarily the reason why MMA should not be in the Olympics. I think that is the main argument for many people who don't want it in the Olympics, just because there's going to be blood and everywhere, and not everyone likes blood. Want want. I mean, you got to get over it. Blood happens in almost every sport. You'll see a bloody nose, or even like broken legs in basketball. You'll see blood in judo. You'll see people just getting cut up in boxing. Things happen in sports. This is why we love it so much because it's unpredictable. And MMA itself is an unpredictable sport. So to see it in the Olympics would be amazing. And I'm not going to touch on it yet. I'll touch on my next time around here. But just to see the countries represented in the different matchups that we could potentially see outside of just MMA itself and in the Olympics would be so much fun.
Yes, just yes. There is no debate to be had here. And the reason there is no debate to be had here is because Hunter has just hit on the perfect point to make here. The Olympics have removed the last barrier as to why MMA should be in the Olympics, and they don't even realize how or why they've removed it. When you remove head guards from boxing, you already have the cuts, you already have the violence. What you've done is removed the last hurdle to something like MMA being allowed into the Olympics. I've watched a lot of Olympic boxing, amazing, by the way, might I add. And we've seen the cuts, we've seen the broken noses and all these kind of injuries. In MMA, somehow they're actually slightly less frequent because, like Hunter just said, it is not all head targeting. They're not just all targeting upstairs. It's being mixed up to the legs, the body, the head, so on and so forth. MMA in the Olympics would be amazing because then what you also actually have is an MMA, and I don't think this is something anybody's realized. If you have Taekwondo fighters, judo fighters, boxing fighters, they can all compete for another medal too.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Let them come into
Yeah.
that'd be
MMA as
awesome.
well. Like I literally just thought of that there, and I let them come too.
Yeah.
If you someone like Ronda Rousey back in the day at the Olympics and MMA had been an Olympic sport back then, she
Insane.
could have been in the cage competing for another medal, and she probably would have won too. So this is something no one's thinking of. This is a greater opportunity. If these fighters want to transition, perhaps from judo, from taekwondo, from boxing, they're literally being given the same platform, and they're being allowed to compete for more honors at the same time. Also, one of the other huge reasons why mixed martial arts should be at the Olympics, and I have a feeling I think I know where Hunter's going with this. So I'm going to say my point, and if I'm on the same tracks, then I really hope we are. What MMA at the Olympics allows us to do is it allows us to definitively prove who the best is at every weight division. Organization politics aren't an issue anymore. Divisions aren't an issue as much anymore. Like, for example, at middleweight and light heavyweight at one championship, Renier de Ryder, you have him thrown into the mix against the 185ers. You've got all the top guys from Bellator. You have AJ McKee thrown into the 145 division against the best of the UFC in one championship. There's no barriers preventing us from finding out who the best is. And because it's the Olympics, you also have a podium, so you've got more guys being rewarded as well. It's not just one guy with a belt and there's any controversy. You have gold, silver, and bronze. So, for example, at say, I'm just going to pick a random example here, say featherweight, because we discussed it earlier in this episode. You could have Max Holloway with a gold medal. You could have AJ McKee with a silver medal. You could have someone like Ortega with a bronze, or mix it up in any order you wish. the variety of competition MMA in the Olympics would give us is amazing. And it would give every country such an amazing platform to compete as well. It really would. I actually can't wait to come back on my next lap on this. I'm so psyched to hear what you guys have to say about this.
I know this is one of those topics. We had one when we were talking about Connor and on the last one with you, just so pumped to talk about, and I am so excited to talk about this one. First off, the first rotation is about should MMA be in the Olympics? Of course it should. People who argue MMA is too violent, it's just human cockfighting, or old people who don't understand what MMA actually is. It's art. It's the purest form of art because you get to see actual combat in its total form. I love watching boxing. Boxing is an entertaining sport to watch, but it's not MMA. MMA is everything. MMA is as real as it gets if it was to be in an actual situation. Another thing, and one that you guys both talked about, boxing is more dangerous than MMA. Now, when you first look at that, it doesn't make any sense. How could it be more dangerous than MMA? MMA has leg kicks. You're getting kicked in the face. You're getting submitted and stuff. Well, this is the biggest thing. So one, the head shots and the body shots. That's two spots when you're getting hit at. Majority of the time, it's the head. But the biggest thing, and this is why boxing is more dangerous than MMA, is because boxing, you get dropped, you are allowed to get back up. You 10 seconds, you can get back up, and then you get dropped again, and then you get dropped again, and then maybe they'll stop the fight then, but it depends on the referee. And MMA, one, if someone gets you in a choke, you pass out, it's over, or you tap, or an armbar or something like that, right? Two, if you get dropped, the ref doesn't let you just get back up. You're going in there to finish them just like that and get it done. And if someone gets actually knocked out cold, which happens quite a bit, obviously, then the fight is stopped right there, and there's no like waiting to see if they're going to get back. There's no added danger of that. The fight is over from that point on. So yeah, just like that, the blood thing. There's blood in every sport. I mean, just even track. If someone falls and busts their face open, there's going to be blood in that. It's sports. I mean, come on, get over yourselves. I'm just so hyped about this. I mean, come on. I cannot wait for this next rotation because I mean that's an easy conversation to have. We already had that. I have a whole system that I wanted to break down about how I think it could work, how I think it should work, which is like kind of basic, but I think that they could exactly. Like, I think they could actually implement it in and make it happen. But Hunter, let's get started with you. So like, I don't even know what we're talking about now, but like just like MMA in the Olympics, how do you think it would go?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna touch on one more thing, just like for the old
Yeah.
people that don't like violence and whatnot. Pancration was already an Olympic event years and years ago. That was the combination of wrestling and boxing.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just it's not it shouldn't even be a conversation of why it shouldn't be an Olympic event already. So I'm just gonna go on assuming that in the next 10, 20 years, it's gonna show up. And let me show you why it's gonna be so much fun to watch. And that is because of the teams of each country. We can see Dustin Poirier alongside Colby Covington when they're already enemies, but they have to represent their own country of the US of A. They'll get together. They'll be like, you know what? Screw the beef. We are now teammates again because we are representing our country. And we take a look at Mexico. We can see like maybe Brian Ortega will end up representing Mexico just because they'll like, we need a Mexico candidate. Brian Ortega is going to come in with Brandon Moreno and just all the other Mexican athletes. And it'd just be such a fun diversity of teams we would see rising up in this sport of MMA. And then we would also see like a kind of like a Strikeforce tournament status of this, because you can't just go in and say, all right, this is going to happen here and this is going to happen here and this is going to happen here. No, it has to be a tournament status here, or else we can't really determine who the gold medal or silver medal or bronze medal will be, which will also be so much fun to watch because we haven't seen a really tournament organization in in any MMA other than Bellator, but they can't allow any other fighters from any other organization to compete. When it comes to the Olympics, that's when we can see everyone from every different organization, like Keelan and Jack touched upon. We can see AJ McGee against maybe Giga Chikadze in one of the matchups. We can see so many dream fights that we couldn't even think about before. We talk about all the different dream fights that we missed out on, like Randy Couture, Fedor Emelianenko, and just a bunch of different ones like that. This doesn't have to be reality that we see now. This can change in 10 to 20 years if the Olympics ends up letting MMA into as a sport. It would be such an amazing thing to see, and rules can be unified at that point. We could see a set of rules here because we're not going to keep the rules from like 2000, 1998, whatnot. We're going to have updated rules here. We're going to have updated statuses. We'll have better judging because they're Olympic judges for this sport. They're not just some random person off the street, you know. It's
Blade
going to be
Burnham looking at you.
Yeah.
exactly. And you know what? I don't really need to touch about any further because I know Keelan and Jack are going to cover me on this one here. Keelan, tell them what you got.
Oh, dude, I got so much.
Let's
I
go.
honestly think this is worthy of an Olympics podcast special on its own. I'm calling it right
It
now.
could be.
If
Yeah.
you want to see it, drop it in the comments because I'm totally down for this. I just love the idea. Could you imagine having like a Team USA, a Team Russia,
Oh,
Team Brazil, and then having an Olympics embedded with Poirier and Covington in the same Olympic village? Oh, dude, calling them Dustin Poirier every day at practice. Oh, I can't even deal with it. No, it is amazing, and it has to happen. And what I'm going to say as well is, I think it was you, Jack, that brought it up, and I love the idea. Allegiances could change as well. You know, if you have a guy who I can't even think of an example that comes to mind. If you have a guy who perhaps wants a spot in Team USA for middleweight, but that spot's already taken, he might look through his heritage and see, well, who can I represent that I didn't realize I could? And like Ireland football in 1990 and 1994, I will take anybody I can get. Anybody wants to represent the Green Boys, you're welcome on my side. But think about that for a second. You know, there's so many opportunities here because there's some countries that are represented too much, like Team USA, and there's countries like, just for my example, Team Ireland, that wouldn't be represented enough. So there could be opportunities for people to explore team opportunities that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Um, and what I'm going to do is, in order to help my boy Hunter, I'm going to address one of the biggest issues that people have with the violence aspect. The blood is not the biggest issue. I actually don't think there's many people that would argue that it is. The biggest issue by far, and it's not an issue I disagree with, I actually think we all agree with, is eye pokes. And this
Yeah.
is the perfect opportunity to bring in Trevor Whitman's gloves.
Let's go. It's fixing all the problems.
Ladies and gentlemen, we should be the Olympic Committee because we've just solved everything.
At this point,
30
yeah.
minutes. At this point, we basically are the IOC. No, that's the problem, and I do agree with it. Whenever you have people like John Jones, for example, who are fighting and they stick their fingers out, like, eye pokes are hard to look at, and I'm not going to argue any differently because they are grotesque and they end fights and it's wrong. If you have gloves like Trevor Whitman's, which are curved, but you can still fight and you can still grapple, the problem's solved because you can't poke someone's eye out with a bit of leather. It just doesn't work that way. So exactly, there's so many opportunities for changes. Hunter's unified rules, Hunter's judges we can bring in. We can bring in the gloves. We can bring in the opportunities for other athletes from other sports to compete for new medals too. Make the rules easier for them. Have a team from each country. And oh my God, Jack, I can't even wait to hear what you're going to say next because I know you're just going to, just give it to them. Just give it to them.
Guys, I'm so excited. I'm literally so excited for this. First off, imagine the gloves having the Olympic logo on them and stuff like that.
That'd be so cool.
Oh my gosh, that would be so sick. And then I don't know what they would do, but okay. So first off, one thing that I think would be huge, not just and why the Olympics should consider it, is it would be mutually beneficial. It's not just benefiting our sport; it's benefiting the Olympics because you have the super. How often? I mean, there's a lot of famous people that are in the Olympics, obviously, but I think Habib would come out of retirement if the Olympics were there.
Yeah.
Someone like that, if they had like just the superstars, the absolute superstars in MMA going there, that would draw so many eyes to the Olympics that it would absolutely be mutually beneficial. Secondly, they would sell out stadiums, obviously, because it's the Olympics and stuff. Like, imagine the Olympics in Rio filling out one of their big stadiums, and they could do it. They would do it. They have full fight cards with the first round. Okay, and here's my idea, all right? And I'm going to lay this out, and I'm going to add the stadiums there because I'm so excited, and this would be the best thing ever, and I would lose my mind watching it, and I hate that I'm even thinking about it because now I want to see it happen. But here we go. Okay, here's how I think it should go. I think you combine, you find a catchweight weight in between flyweight and bantamweight, a catchweight weight in between featherweight and lightweight, a catchweight weight in between welterweight and middleweight. Then you do light heavyweight and heavyweight, because those two weight classes are basically catchweights in their own right with the way the current system's set up right now. Then you do a 16 seed tournament with each 16 different countries. Each country gets one representative, but with one backup. So if, let's say, Justin Gaethje was the lightweight representative, or more like if Dustin Poirier was the lightweight representative for the USA, and then he beats someone to move on to the next round, right? But Dustin Poirier is injured, then they sub in Justin Gaethje. So there's one backup for each country. So you have two entering there for each weight class. So as a total, you have Team USA. You would have what 32 or no, that's not right. No, yeah, you would have 32 fighters that would go there, two for each weight division, right? And then from there, so you have a massive Team USA, you have a massive whatever, and what's going on. And some countries obviously wouldn't have a representative in every single weight class. Like I would argue for Giga Chikadze to be in the tournament, but he and Merab Dvalishvili would probably be the only Georgian fighters that would be there. But you could do that, right? Which is what's so exciting. So that's how I think the tournaments would all be lined up, and then you have a gold, silver, bronze for each of those catchweight weight divisions, right? And then you also, and maybe with the catch weights too, you could do the minimum weight and then the maximum weight. And there's maybe like a 5-pound difference in between them too. So it's not so strict like that too, considering you're combining two. I think if you do it every single weight class, that's too many to keep track of and everything. But, and then what they could do is for the first round, for the round of 16, they do it in the stadium, and then they have, obviously the heaviest would headline, and you start the lightest at the beginning, and then you go from there, and that's the first round. And then, I don't know, a week later, then you do round 2, and then, from there, and then you do round 2, and then, all the way up to the final. And then the final would be a whole, a stadium packed full of the final matches for each thing. And that would just be the biggest card ever, because every single fight is for gold. And just how massive that would be. So that's kind of my whole layout of how I think it should work, and how like that would be just absolutely insane. And I think if the Olympics were to do it, I think that would be probably, at least in my mind, that's the way I would like to see it done, is kind of like that tournament format and stuff like that. And I think that would just blow the roof off of the Olympics and MMA and everything. And it would just be the craziest event that I have ever seen live.
Yeah, no, I agree so much that what I would do a little bit different though is I wouldn't just do one fighter from every country to be represented. For those countries that have like dominate in the sport of MMA, I give them like 2 or 3 slots, because like there's not every country that has like a specific fighter in mind when it comes down to a person that they should represent for that country. So I think those countries that have a lot more like fighters within there, they should have more spots in that place. Because how cool would it be to see like Ireland or the US have like a gold medalist and a silver medalist, or like a gold medalist and a bronze medalist, or anything like that? I think that'd be awesome. I love to touch on the point that Jack made about the superstars that would come back. I think Khabib would come back.
Oh yeah.
I think Henry Cejudo would definitely come back no matter what. And part of me also thinks that GSP would come back to represent Canada.
100%.
How awesome would that be? I think.
And with the welterweight lightweight mix up too, you could have Khabib versus GSP as the final.
Easily.
That, oh man.
Easily. Yeah, there's many different possibilities that can come with this MMA being in the Olympics, and a few different things too, just to make sure to cut down on injuries before and after fights. I think you should make the round shorter and maybe less rounds, maybe 2 4-minute rounds, and that's it. And if it ends in a tie, then it goes to a third round tiebreaker.
I would love that.
It's like kind of like the Ultimate Fighter. You get like 2 or 3 minutes to prove you're the winner of that fight. I think there's so many different things that can make this sport awesome again. We can not just have a UFC in the Olympics. We can just have MMA as a whole in the Olympics.
Oh
it's
yeah.
Not just the UFC's unified rules. It's all together. We're going to decide on our own what should be the rules, who's going to compete in this year's Olympics, and why should they compete, and how do they get to compete in the Olympics? They should have to fight for their spot in the Olympics.
Qualifiers, yeah.
And there needs to be incentive too. They can't just have a gold. I think there needs to be a cash payout here, because the UFC in general, UFC fighters and just MMA fighters in general tend to not make enough money to go by ends meet. If they're training for the Olympics, they need either sponsors to pick them up to represent them, and so they can get paid that way, or there needs to be cash bonuses for each win. That just needs to be a rule set in the Olympics. I know that's never how it's been, but if they want Olympic athletes who are in the MMA caliber, then they're going to have to start paying their athletes as well. So that's just what I think. There's a lot of different points you can make. I can go on for hours talking about this, but those are the main ones.
Guys, my mind's just been broken. Not only have we managed to get MMA into the Olympics, not only have we solved the sport, but we've brought GSP back. Not even the UFC could do that, and Hunter and Jack have just brought the greatest of all time, arguably, back. My mind's gone, I swear to God. That is such an amazing point. Think of the people who could come back for one-off appearances every 4 years to compete for a medal. Daniel Cormier would come back.
Oh, he would do it.
GSP Cejudo. I had someone else in mind and I completely forgot who it was. Damn it.
Imagine John Jones representing us. That'd be terrible.
Oh my!
Hey,
he would pop. He would pop for performance.
He would pop.
Before it would happen. Yeah.
Only John Jones, the first ever man to pop for steroids at 2 different events.
I'll tell you what, we have TJ representing us at least as a backup for Cejudo, unless they did too.
They should have their own team EPO.
Oh yeah.
Well, the cheats on that side.
Yeah.
This is just such an amazing idea. I really, really love it. You know, the level of competition it would be is just astronomical. And let's not forget, outside of events like the World Cup and the Super Bowl and things like that, the Olympics is still probably in the top 3 greatest sporting events in history.
Yeah.
And it's still in the most viewed sporting events of all time. If you combine the biggest combat sport in the world with the biggest sporting event in the world, you've got probably double World Cup viewing in there easily. And if you think about the sort of minority nations who don't have that many people that would compete, think of who you could bring in. You could bring in the Georgians. You could bring in Arjun Balar, who represents India at heavyweight.
Yeah.
He's the 1 championship heavyweight champion. Bring in people like that. You know, I know obviously it's very rudimentary and we'd need much more time to think about it, but there's so much promise with this. There really is. And I really hope it is done because I just think it would be incredible. And, you know, one other thing I will say in this is we obviously all loved Pride back in the day. Always remember, Pride does indeed never die. And Pride had it right at the beginning because they had massive Grand Prix with those sort of 16-fold mechanisms that Jack just mentioned. And what people did as well is, you'll remember there's a lot of controversies about it. Guys would leave their organizations to go to Pride to test themselves against the best. The Olympics gives you the perfect platform to do that. And if you can win a gold medal in mixed martial arts at the Olympics, then you can say undisputably, unquestionably, I am the best. Yeah. And what we can also do is this. Gold medal, silver medal is pretty easy. That's the final. The 2 losers of the semi-finals
get and
they compete for the bronze. And then if you want to do something for 4th place, I don't know. But for the bronze medal, that's how you sort that as well. This is so accessible and it's so within our grasp. And I'm telling you, it can be done. And I really, really hope it is because my mind's been blown with the ideas that I've heard. Incredible.
I mean, we just need people like us up there that's just like, all right, we're gonna get this done. We're not gonna delegate. We're just gonna get it done. It's gonna happen. I mean, I'm just thinking too. Think about how stacked the middleweight Olympic competition would be with guys like you would entering back Gegard Mousasi. You have Renato de Ritter. I guess he's lightweight or light heavyweight now, but he fights at middleweight too. Israel Adesanya, obviously, Robert Whitaker, and those are all different nationalities, and we haven't even mentioned one American in there yet. I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm so excited. I really hope. I mean, realistically, this is probably never going to happen. But if it did happen, there's too much, stuff that would happen to get in the way of it. But
Cain Velasquez, that's who I was thinking of.
Cain Velasquez, I could see him coming back. Yeah, I don't know the injuries, but I don't know if he would do good. But I could see him coming back from Mexico, and that'd be fascinating to see. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many things you could do with this that just makes it so exciting. It's so exciting to think about, just because it would absolutely be one of the biggest sporting events in history if MMA was involved with the Olympics and everything that's going on. I mean, I also just think about the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, we were talking about how the UFC is going to become the Saturday sport. Like you have UFC on Saturday, NFL on Sunday, plus EPL and everything. If they make it non-pay-per-views, which is where they're transitioning, I mean, plus if they go into the Olympics, I mean, MMA is just absolutely a household name. Is what you're talking about. And another thing that I just thought of real quick too is just the absolute one of the reasons global viewership for it would be astronomical is because even people who don't watch MMA, if it's in the Olympics and they've heard of the name Israel Adesanya before, they're like, this is in the Olympics now? Like, what's going on? Then they watch it and the fights are absolute madness. Like, let's say, yeah, like Hunter, what you said, if they were, I don't know, 3.5 minute rounds or something weird like that, if they were like that, right? And you just have absolute carnage in there stuff. And with the tournament format too, think about like the continued damage that you'd have moving on to each round. And they would have to do, you can't just pull out and sub out and then come back in. If you pulled out, you were out of the tournament and your backup's in. But just, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. We've laid it out beautifully. I mean, I'm praying this happens because Dana White, Khabib, everybody that's listening, push for this because we need it. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, guys, yeah.
Just real quick before we go
Totally.
as well. If you think about growing a new fan base as well, let's remember this as well. Every time the Olympics is on, it's not just households that watch the Olympics. Bars, restaurants, public places all show the Olympics. And let's say you have, I don't know, all around the world, I'll just use as an example, 100,000 people. And these people have all been skeptics of MMA and they said, oh, I heard about that Conor McGregor. I don't want to watch MMA and UFC and all this rubbish. If they're subconsciously exposed to MMA and they see how amazing it actually is, you're getting more and more new fans as well because they watch the Olympics. There's literally no way to lose here.
You are absolutely right. I mean, they got to do it at this point, right? The MMA Island podcast, putting it out there. Everybody's listening. Like, let's go. Let's make it happen. Absolutely. Hey,
MMA Island Olympic Committee.
Exactly. Hey, if this ever happens and they use what we talked about, I mean, we got to be out there. We got to be a part of it. Yeah, exactly. Hunter's on it. So, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. As always, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to us everywhere, literally everywhere, including iTunes and Spotify. Follow us on Instagram at mma.island and check out our website, mmaisland.net. Again, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Amazing podcast, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.